Here's Hillary Clinton in 2004 speaking on the subject of gay marriage.
I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
Here she is giving an even more direct answer to the question around the same time.
Let me ask you this about some domestic issues in New York State. This state's always the social beginnings of so much in this country. People come here, a lot of immigrants. The New York Times recently began posting the celebrations of gay unions. Not just straight people getting married, but gay people who want to announce their unions. Do you think New York State should recognize gay marriage?
No.
No.
But that's all in the past now. Now, Hillary Clinton is a great champion of gay rights. Oh yeah, I don't even have to play a clip of that. That's just the official stance of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Pro-gay marriage, pro-equality. Big deal. A lot of people change their mind around the same time. That's very true. I don't think Hillary's change between 2004 and 2015 is based on her growing understanding of the issues involved. I wish it was, but I don't think it is. Because you see, in 2004, when Hillary thought that marriage was a sacred, that means from God, sacred bond between a man and a woman, the polls said that 62% of people opposed gay marriage, 30% of people were in favor of it. That's what the polls said in 2004. And now Hillary is a great champion of gay rights. Wow, how interesting is that? So when it came time in 2004 to stand up for her gay constituents, who believed her to be a liberal-minded person, who fights for the little guy, she did not do that. She instead capitulated to what was popular, to what was trendy. She made a political calculation. And she is still making that calculation. A true leader can convince people of their vision. Hillary doesn't have that ability, so instead, she just rattles back what's popular. She's the most mainstream candidate. She is always the most mainstream candidate, no matter which way the wind is blowing in America, because Hillary Clinton, she's not a leader. She's a follower. She follows the polls because she doesn't stand on principle. She does not stand on principle. She stands on polling numbers, and that alone. Same with the Iraq War, by the way. When she voted to authorize the Iraq War, 62% of Americans favored that war. Did she stand on principle and say, well, I know it's not the popular thing at the moment, but I'm against this? No, of course not. But then again, how could she have known that it would be such a quagmire? How could she have known that it would be hugely costly, with no exit strategy, and massive Iraqi civilian casualties, and massive American soldier casualties? How could she possibly have known what a debacle the Iraq War was going to be? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, audience, because she would have known that if she had listened.
Mr. Speaker, in the brief time I have, let me give you 5 reasons why I'm opposed to giving the President a blank check to launch a unilateral invasion and occupation of Iraq, and why I will vote against this resolution. 1, I have not heard any estimates of how many young American men and women might die in such a war, or how many tens of thousands of women and children in Iraq might also be killed. As a caring nation, we should do everything we can to prevent the horrible suffering that a war will cause. War must be the last recourse in international relations, not the first. 2nd, I am deeply concerned about the precedent that a unilateral invasion of Iraq could establish in terms of international law and the role of the United Nations. If President Bush believes that the U.S. can go to war at any time against any nation, what moral or legal obligation could our government raise if another country chose to do the same thing? 3rd, the United States is now involved in a very difficult war against international terrorism, as we learned tragically on September 11th. We are opposed by Osama bin Laden and religious fanatics who are prepared to engage in a kind of warfare that we have never experienced before. I agree with Brent Scowcroft, Republican former National Security Advisor for President George Bush Sr., who stated, and I quote, "An attack on Iraq at this time would seriously jeopardize, if not destroy, the global counter-terrorist campaign we have undertaken, end quote. Fourth, at a time when this country has a $6 trillion national debt and a growing deficit, we should be clear that a war and a long-term American occupation of Iraq could be extremely expensive. Fifth, I am concerned about the problems of so-called unintended consequences. Who will govern Iraq when Saddam Hussein is removed? And what role will the U.S. play in an ensuing civil war that could develop in that country? Will moderate governments in the region who have large Islamic fundamentalist populations be overthrown and replaced by extremists? Will the bloody conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority be exacerbated? And these are just a few of the questions that remain unanswered.
Bernie Sanders stood on principle. Hillary Clinton stood on polling numbers. Sanders looked at the situation objectively. This is bad for America. I do not support this. Hillary Clinton looked at it and said, what do the polls say? Polls say 62% of Americans support it, Hillary. And so instead of using her own brain and her own decision-making skills, she yielded the decision to the truck drivers and hairdressers of America. And look, whatever, I'm not trying to be elitist here. Truck drivers, hairdressers, perfectly noble professions, but they don't necessarily know a lot about geopolitics, foreign policy, military intervention, stuff like that. Hillary Clinton voted how the poll numbers told her to, and in doing so, she put her job security above our national security. But let's assume that Hillary genuinely changed her mind on gay marriage and on Iraq. It had nothing to do with polls. They were just her own decisions. Well, even if you believe that to be the case, it just means that Hillary Clinton is playing a game of catch-up with Bernie Sanders. There's a clip of Bernie Sanders giving an impassioned speech against the Iraq War. The year was 1991. This is the original Iraq War. And he still stood by the same principles that he does today.
Today is a tragic day for humanity, for the people of Iraq, for the people of the United States, and for the United Nations as an institution. It is also a tragic day for the future of our planet and for the children, 30,000 of whom in the third world will starve to death today while we spend billions to wage this war.
But the remarkable thing is that in the midst of this impassioned, powerful speech, the camera pans to the audience, or rather, the lack thereof. There's no one there. There's no one listening. And still, he speaks with passion. He speaks with conviction. Because Bernie Sanders has the courage and the conviction to stand by an unpopular belief, to champion an idea that isn't currently mainstream. When has Hillary Clinton ever done that? When has she ever shown us that there is within her character someone who is willing to fight for an idea that is not, at the time, popular? The only thing, in my opinion, that Hillary Clinton believes in is the furtherance of her own power, the furtherance of her own ego. She does not deserve to be president.